Tonight, a plane goes down at Tauranga Airport. There's still a chance to nominate a volunteer group, and more from Janine about life on the Mercy ships. Kia ora and good evening. Welcome to Central News on TV Central for Wednesday, the 11th of March. I'm Amanda Harper. In today's news, fuel was seen leaking from a Tiger Moth two-seater plane after it crashed at Tauranga Airport yesterday afternoon. 2 people walked away from the crash on runway 7 and were treated by St John paramedics for minor injuries, while firefighters at the scene sprayed down the leaking fuel from the aircraft. Tauranga City Council Communications Manager Amy Driscoll says there were 2 people aboard, including the pilot, who had difficulty landing at the airport. She says the plane was removed from the runway within 30 minutes of the accident, and Air New Zealand services were only disrupted for 5 minutes. Civil Aviation will determine if an investigation into the incident is required. Families are currently the fastest growing category of local bookings for cruises. Carol Sutton, travel expert and manager of House of Travel in Hamilton, says more are choosing to visit far-flung places that were previously difficult to access with kids.
Well, we're finding that they're venturing further afield. We've got clients now going up into Alaska, which is a really great environmental opportunity for clients to actually be going up into that wilderness area. We're going across to the Mediterranean. Again, we've got some fantastic ports of call, like all of Europe grew up around the waterways, so that's exciting. And of course, our South Pacific and Australia will always be a big growth region.
Despite a lingering stereotype that cruises are for older generations, figures from the Cruise Lines International Association show more than 2 million children younger than 15 years sailed on cruises in 2013, and Carol says the cruises provide a safer environment to travel in.
But I've got 4 children of my own, and actually it's a really neat way to actually travel. Like, you're actually in a very, very safe environment. As I say, you're not packing, you're only unpacking once, you're hopping on board, you're unpacked for the week. The kids love it, and it's a great way to travel, to see a lot more in a short time.
Catch the full story with Carol Sutton tomorrow night on Central News. This year is the 100th anniversary of Gallipoli in Turkey, and one of New Zealand's most entertaining events on the mountain bike calendar is returning to Rotorua on Sunday, April the 26th. President of the host club, the Rotorua Single Speed Society, Gary Sullivan, says they will organise a dawn ride to the Anzac Day service at Ohinemutu on the shores of Lake Rotorua, and they want to make this year even more special than ever. While the championships are eccentric with extravagant costumes, tattoos for the fastest man and woman, and on-course beverages, it also has a heart of gold and a serious side, making substantial donations to various charities over the last 7 years. And now for our region's weather. Hamilton, expect cloud increasing with rain later on, scattered rain throughout the rest of the Waikato. High of 25 and overnight low of 13. Paeroa 24 high and 15 low. Matamata you drop to 22 with a 14 low. Te Awamutu 25 and 13. Tokoroa 22 high and 12 low. And for Tauranga, cloud increasing with rain later on, high of 24 and low of 16. For other parts of the bay, expect the same. Te Puke, your high is 22 and overnight low of 15. And for the marine forecast, West Coast Raglan, easterly 15 knots, high tide is at 10 past 3 in the afternoon. And on the east coast, easterly 20 knots, high tide is at 12:34 p.m. Coming up, get your nominations in. Welcome back to Central News. I'm Amanda Harper. There are still a couple more days left to go to get your nominations in for the Trust Power Community Awards, which closes this Friday, 13th of March.
So I'm a Trust Power Community Relations representative, so part of the community relations team at Trust Power, and we oversee, well, a big part of my job is the Trust Power Community Awards program, but we also have lots of other sponsorship activities.
Yeah. And how does your work actually benefit the community?
Yeah, well, basically the Trust Power Community Awards is the major focus of our sponsorship activities, And that involves us working in partnership with local councils across the country to recognise voluntary groups and community organisations. So we basically get involved in those local communities by recognising all of the incredible work that these voluntary groups do through the Trustpower Community Awards.
Okay. And entries for that need to be in by the end of this week, is that right?
That's correct. So currently the Trustpower Waipawa District Community Awards are open and entries do close this Friday.
Yeah. Now, are they separated into categories?
That's correct. So there's heritage and environment, so perhaps a group driving an awesome environmental project inside the community. There's health and wellbeing, so perhaps along the lines of a group working towards having a healthier community. We've got arts and culture, so that could involve volunteers doing an artsy project or a mural somewhere. Sports and leisure, so this could be anything from your coaches on the sidelines to the managers who are organising the teams to the refs. And then education and child youth development, so that's again a voluntary group that basically helps to encourage stronger education inside a sector of the community. So volunteers are everywhere, and just we have these categories to help try and define how they all fit in.
Yeah. Now, there are other sort of volunteer awards out there as well. How does your one differ to those?
Yeah, cool. So the Trustpower Community Awards is all about recognising groups. So we're not about recognising individuals, unfortunately. And so they started in 1994 in the Western Bay of Plenty Tauranga region. So we've been going for over 20 years now, so that's really exciting.
And what are the judges looking for?
Yeah, so basically we're on the hunt for literally wherever these volunteers involved. We'd love to hear about them. And so every group's got a different story. But at the moment, with the Waipawa District Community Awards being open, we're really keen to hear about any group that someone out there in the community feels deserves recognition. They've been working hard under the radar, and it's really cool to highlight their story. Even though they don't do it for the recognition, it's really important to recognise all that these people do for the community.
Yeah. Do you have any personal stories that have actually touched you?
Oh, well, I can't help but always bring up the Picton Flower Ladies. Not in the Waipawa District, and there is plenty of cool groups in the Waipawa District doing great work, but the Picton Flower Ladies, I did the Marlborough Awards last year, and so for over 20 years, these lovely ladies have been growing their garden specifically to arrange bouquets for all of the people that come off the cruise ships. So some days that's thousands of people, and that's potentially 40 cruise ships a season. And so these lovely ladies, they get together the day before, they make these little flower bouquets, and they go and meet every single person coming off the cruise ships and welcome them to the community with this lovely little personalised bouquet. So to be doing that for 20 years and growing your garden specifically, I just can't seem to get that story out of my head. I just think it's amazing.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
You must really love your job.
Yeah, it's really positive, and it's just an absolute pleasure to learn about volunteers are just everywhere. I just can't believe what people give over of their lives to help their community. It's very motivational.
If you know of a group in your community doing wonders, head to the Trustpower website and fill out a simple form. Bay Trust in Tauranga are about helping businesses and getting involved within the community. Hilary talks to Terry about this and about working with the CSI.
Well, we've had involvement from the beginning with Ministry of Social Development. Annie Ross, who is an advisor for them. I can't remember her exact position title, I think it's changed, but she's more or less my equivalent at MSD, and she does a lot of community development work. Her and I got together right from the start in the scoping of this report, and other people in Bay Trust, and we also involved the Community Response Forum, who are groups of people, and there's one in every community across the Bay of Plenty. They are people who report direct to the Minister and advise the Minister direct, so they're kind of coordinated by MSD, but they don't report to MSD, their advice goes direct to the Minister. So they're quite a powerful group of people. So they were, if you like, the partners to the project, and the others involved were the community, of course. One of the fantastic things about this was when we went out to the community to consult with them, I said from the start that we wanted to talk to people in the community about this, because there is a saying that we have, do nothing about me without me. So I said, whatever we do, we have to go and talk to the people in the community. So we rocked up, MSD, myself and the community response people, plus the facilitators, in 4 different communities. We went to Whakatane, which was the Eastern Bay. Western Bay we did Tauranga, Rotorua and Taupo. We went to all these communities. We had absolutely fantastic response from people who wanted to be involved, wanted to help us think about it, wanted to help us identify what were their community's particular aspirations and priorities. And it was virtually a whole day's effort for them to give up a day to actually come along and talk to us. So we had absolutely amazing response, and such a dedicated, committed group of people who were willing to not only think about their little corner of the world. So you had somebody there who might work with children the first 1,000 days, or they might work with youth, but they're ready to consider the overall picture. And one of the really fantastic things that came out of that was their realisation that in order to be more effective in working in these two areas, they needed to be more effective in their own collaboration. So that we're actually helping communities do that as a separate exercise now, because that was so important that they realised that, and it's so positive. It was absolutely great to see.
Who were some of the partners in completing the research?
The main contract was with the Centre for Social Impact, CSI, great name. Now they are actually an offshoot of ASB Community Trust, which is our cousin. ASB is actually the biggest philanthropic funder in Australasia. They're huge. So they have got the resources and the power to actually set up these kind of entities, and they've recently set up CSI. I had worked with the principal from CSI before and their main researcher on other projects that we had. So when they set this up, I rang them and I said, we're looking at this, what do you think, how can you help? And from that we actually developed the whole scope along with Annie from MSD and Bay Trust Chair, Jenny Marnie. So they were the ones that actually coordinated the whole thing. They had people, separate people doing the facilitation in the community hui. We had Kitarana Pepe, and her daughter came along and did that. She was absolutely fantastic. People just really reacted very well to her. We had a separate guy who did the survey, the email survey of the entities, just saying what do you do, what are your strengths and weaknesses. And then Alison Taylor and Sarah Bennett were the people that actually pulled the report together. So we're really, really pleased with the report. We've actually put it out now it's been to all the community groups that were involved, which were a lot of people that were funded by Bay Trust and MSD, and anybody else who wanted to come along. We got their email address pretty quickly. So it's been out to all of those people. It's also been out to all of the funders in the region that I could track down. So we've had really quite amazing response, really positive response so far. So it's still early days, but it's really exciting.
Hilary will be back after the break with the rest of the story. Welcome back to Central News. Hilary carries on with Bay Trust in Tauranga.
What kind of questions did you ask at these hui?
Well, we had a process, which is described in the report, where we basically said to them, what do you see as the priorities for your community? What do you think is working well? What's not working so well? And long story short, we actually got them to a position where, and it was quite funny, they almost became a funder. So they had up on the wall a number of priorities, they spread around the wall, and then they got to vote with pretend money as to which one they think should be funded. And what was interesting was watching them, how they went through that process, because you had a room, say in Tauranga we had 50 odd people, so they were all split into groups and they're all going, oh, how are we going to do this? We've got this much money and there's all those priorities, how do we think about it? And I really strongly remember one chap in Rotorua said, oh, I'm not doing that, that's too hard. And I said, well, welcome to my world, because this is the kind of decision that we face every day. There's a number of priorities and we've got this much money and that much need. How do we actually decide which are the ones that we should fund? So that's why we were consulting the community.
Were there any particular patterns or repetitive thoughts that came out?
They need to collaborate more, and in order to do that, they saw that it would be really helpful for them to have a community hub concept. Now, some of those communities already had community hubs, but not working in the way that they saw it working. So how these groups saw a community hub working is having one building where a lot of them could be housed, virtually an open area that had access to, you could see other people, so you could make cross referrals of people. You could talk to another service provider about what they did, and could they perhaps help my client over here. You could have shared backroom functions like computer systems and counting and one reception or two receptions. So it was enable them to share their resources a lot more, but enable them to have integrated services for their clients. And that it really surprised me that came out very strongly in every centre we went to.
Why did that surprise you?
I think because initially we were going there with this quite narrow definition of first 1,000 days of a child's life and youth engagement, what are your priorities, what do you need to do here? And they, quite hearteningly I think, went to the big picture. If we really want to be effective, this is what we need to do. Okay, that's great, that's awesome. They looked at the priorities for the communities for each of those things as well, but they were strong on the big things. Even to the extent that if you want to really make a difference to a child in the first 1,000 days of their life, they need to have a good housing. So housing is actually, healthy housing is one of Bay Trust's other priorities, but we didn't tell them that. They came up with that on their own accord, saying we don't want to just look narrowly and say we've got to have programs X, Y and Z. We need to look at the more holistic picture of a child.
If you would like to get in touch with the team at Bay Trust, check out their website, baytrust.org.nz. Yesterday we introduced you to a special Matamata local living a unique lifestyle on board a Mercy ship. She tells me more about life on board the ship, packed full with volunteers who travel around the coast of Africa, providing free surgeries and medical assistance to those in need.
Well, as I said, we have like 400 plus volunteers on the ship at any one time, and they come from maybe over 35 different nationalities from around the world. So a lot of Kiwis, Aussies, Americans, Dutchies, West African crew from all over really, which is actually really cool. Makes it into a very multicultural environment, which is great. So you hear all sorts of languages on the ship, which is really cool.
And is there a high staff turnover? Because I imagine a job like that would be very stressful and not everyone's cut out for it.
Yeah, that's right. We do have quite a high staff turnover. There's lots of different roles on the ship. In some roles, the minimum requirement for the commitment to be there may be 2 weeks for an OR or operating theatre nurse or a surgeon. Some positions require a lot longer. With mine, it's like 2 or 3 years. You can imagine the captain, you would want a captain there for a reasonable amount of time as well. We also have a school on board, so our school teachers, their requirement is to be there for 2 years. But we do have quite a high turnover of our very short-term crew. Makes it interesting and fun. Also has its challenges as well, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Now you just mentioned school teacher. Are there children on board as well?
Yeah, we actually have I think 47 kids on board. Okay. I think it's going to be 48 soon. So they're like the kids of some of the crew members, like the captain is on the ship with his family, the school principal is on the ship with his family. So we have a fully accredited school on board, so kids can go through our school and they can come out with a high school diploma or the equivalent of, so then they can go straight to university after that.
What an incredible way to grow up.
It is really, yeah. The kids learn a whole heap of stuff. Of course they still live on a ship, so it has its own rules, but anywhere has rules. So the kids, they have a very diverse and unusual life on the ship, but it's great and it brings a place alive as well.
Would you say it's risky though, you know, exposing your children to the certain dangers that Africa has to offer?
I don't think it's any more risky than anywhere else. Everywhere else has its dangers. I mean, kid can, or anybody can walk across the road and they get like flattened. But on the ship, you just have different risks, if you like, because we live so close together in a close-knit community. If there's like a tummy bug or stuff like that, it'll go around actually a little bit quicker, because it's like living with 400 people in a family situation in a house. If you get sick in your house at home in New Zealand, you tend to be have all the rest of the family get sick as well. So that's probably the biggest difference. The risks in Africa are really no different to anywhere else much of the time. Yeah.
And do you find that the friendships you form with those that you work with are closer than just sort of normal friendships?
They are in some ways, because everything is so intense on the ship all the time, because things are happening so fast constantly and there's always change going on, so you have to be very flexible. The people that you work with and live with, because it's 24/7 everything that you do, relationships do develop very quickly, and they're which is great, except people come and go all the time, so you might develop a relationship like a friendship with somebody and then 2 weeks later their commitment is over. So it's a little bit different in that way, yeah, but it's part of it, and that's what you're prepared to go through, if you like. Yeah.
Just before we finish, if your stories perhaps inspired someone to do what you're doing, what key attributes do you need to have in order to survive working for Mercy Ships?
Survive. I like that. You have to survive life wherever you are, really. Some key attributes. The biggest one probably is flexibility and willingness to learn, because Mercy Ships we're kind of unique. We don't really fit into any box. So you have to be prepared to learn a whole lot of new things and let a whole lot of other things go, because we do things, if you like, the Mercy Ships way. Because we have different nationalities on board, we have to blend everything.
Yeah.
So we have our own way of figuring out solutions to things. So probably the biggest thing is flexibility. And of course you have to fund yourself, and you have to be prepared to have quite a different lifestyle to the lifestyle of a typical Kiwi, if you like.
Untreated tumours grow to staggering sizes. Even benign tumours can become a death sentence. Dense cataracts rob their victims of sight. Birth defects, such as cleft lip, are easily treated in developed countries. But in West Africa, such defects remain untreated. The situation is further complicated by a superstitious culture. Abnormalities and deformities are believed to be the result of a curse. Mothers and fathers abandon their own babies. Villagers reject their neighbours. And those who suffer physical diseases are burdened with devastating, heartbreaking isolation. But hope is not lost. Mercy is on its way, in the form of a big white hospital ship carrying a precious cargo. Dedicated volunteers from over 30 countries.
Such an interesting but challenging way of life. That is it from me tonight. To stay up to date with all that we do, like us on Facebook, search centralnews.tv. Also, I would like to thank our viewers for watching Central News. We are all about covering stories within the diverse communities that make up the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. And if you think you might have a story for us, email news@tvcentral.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. I'll be back on screens tomorrow with more stories from the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty. My name is Amanda Harper. Have a good night. Ko Marie.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.